Up these stairs into another world. So today's walk takes us into a really magical, hidden little pocket of inner London. We're going to a place that was described by Ed Glinert in his magisterial London Compendium as being the most picturesque and best preserved inner London suburb. It's a really beautiful place. It's one of my favourite places to walk, particularly in summer evenings. Today, our trip into secret Islington takes us to Canonbury and possibly beyond. Let's see how we go. So our walking tour of secret Islington starts here by the majestic Union Chapel, built in the 1870s as part of the Victorian Gothic revival, and to this day still a working chapel and also a really magnificent music venue. I'm just going to pass along Compton Terrace here. This looks like it could be a Victorian terrace, or it might even be Georgians. There's some Georgian houses in the area, and the name Compton comes from the family who owned much of this land, the Earls and the Marquesses of Northampton. I see lots of references to both Compton and Northampton as we go around the streets and squares here. So we'll just go through Compton Terrace Gardens here. This is a delightful little oasis. Islington actually has the least amount of green space of any borough in London. So little strips of open space like this, little gardens like this, are a real bonus, a real premium. Really treasured spaces. Canonbury is one of the old manors of Islington and one of the old manors of North London. There would have been a manor here before the Norman Conquest, but the name Canonbury comes from Canonsburg. It was a manor that was given to the Priory of St Bartholomew down in Smithfield, and that's where the name Canonbury comes from. The development of this area and its interest to the priors of St Bartholomew would have been the presence of springs in the area. Islington is a place of springs rising on the high ground above the city of London. So there were a number of conduits that would have fed the priories down there around the edge of the city. And of course we have Upper Street running along here, one of the great streets of London, and that marks the northern boundary of Canonbury. It's an area that basically consists of a triangle. Just over the road from Compton Terrace we have the Hope and Anger pub there. That's another famous punk venue. Everyone's played there. U2 have played there. I think the Clash must have played there as well. That's an amazing pub. In the London nobody knows, the great Geoffrey Fletcher writes that to walk from Upper Street to Canonbury Square is to move into an entirely different world. And that's where we're going now. But first, we're just going to go down here, down Compton Avenue, just to look at the brilliant Compton Arms down there. I mean, this could just be a pub tour. There are some great pubs on this walk, two in particular that are worthy of note, but we will come to those. And many, many, many other things. There are so many associations with this part of London, as I'm sure you can probably already guess. And here we have the majestic Canonbury Square. Work started on this square in 1805. It is a fantastic example of a Georgian square, built on land owned by the Duke or the Marquess of Northampton. In 1956, the Evening Standard declared this London's most beautiful square. It really is gorgeous. The plane trees here are really old. There's some ancient trees here. And the square there was built in the 1840s. And then in the 1880s, it was opened to the public and donated to Islington Council. It was the first of these squares to actually be open to the public. It started a bit of a trend. Of course, some of them still not open to the public. It's interesting to think that after the Second World War, this square was basically derelict. A lot of it had been bombed out. The northeast corner behind me had been bombed out and was derelict. And they couldn't even really get rid of these houses. No one wanted to live in this area. A friend of mine, his grandfather worked for London County Council, and they offered him a house here in the 1940s for £500. And I suppose £500 was still £500, but it was relatively cheap. Large parts of Islington weren't fully inhabited until the 1960s, and then you get the first kind of wave of middle-class gentrification of formerly sort of run down, still slightly bombed out areas. And that was a real story of Islington and parts of Camden. There are a couple of really notable addresses around Canonbury Square that we absolutely must visit. They're doing lots of works around Canonbury Square at the moment. So you'll hear the noise of plant machinery and diggers and all sorts, and there's all this stuff littering the square. So on Canonbury Road here is one of my favourite galleries in the world, the Estorick Collection. It's been on my list for a while to do a video where I walk to the Estorick Collection. That's a real Islington thing. And it looks like it's closed. That doesn't surprise me that it's closed, but it's such a wonderful gallery. It specialises in contemporary Italian art, 20th century Italian art, but it's particularly known for its futurist collection. It's a really magnificent collection here. It's in the old Northampton Lodge, which I think is one of the first buildings to be built on Canonbury Square. It was one of the bigger houses here. And it was started by an American art collector who moved to Britain after the Second World War. And they've got some really magnificent works. They've got Giacomettis in their collection there, so you want to see real Giacomettis in a relatively small gallery space. They've also got some brilliant De Chiricos in there. It's brilliant. Highly, highly, massively recommend a visit to the Estorick. Right, now we need to find the residence of one of my favourite writers, one of the all-time great British writers, and the author of one of the most important books ever written in the English language, which was started here. Can you guess who it is? Some of you will know. And also, actually, out the corner of my eye, I can see the prime location that makes Canonbury famous, but I'm going to save that for you. That's coming up just around here. It's one of the great locations in London, one of the greats, bar none. So it was in this house behind me here, 27B Canonbury Square, that George Orwell moved to in autumn 1944. The green plaque on the wall there used to say that he moved here in 1945, and they've corrected it. But actually, it's interesting, I was reading online that the dates given for his residence here were from 45 to 1950 when he died, whereas on the plaque it says 44 to 1947. Considering that Orwell's son, Richard Blair, unveiled the plaque here in 2016, the new plaque with the correct dates on it, I think we'll take those dates as being the correct one. It was while he was living here that Orwell adopted his son, Richard, and it was living here at Canonbury Square that he started writing 1984. Animal Farm was published not long after he moved in. This is one of the great residences of literary London. Of course, the phrase from 1984 which resonates today is "Big Brother is watching you." And quite hilariously, there used to be a CCTV camera that was close to that plaque, so you could get a photograph that showed the plaque and the CCTV camera in one shot. It's quite funny that they seem to have removed it. I'm trying to remember where it was. It must have been on that post there in front of the house. The railings around Canonbury Square were removed during the war and they were replaced with chicken wire. But this happened all around London. George Orwell remarked in one of his kind of diary pieces from 1946 that the railings hadn't yet been returned to London parks. which is an interesting comment to make, isn't it, in 1946, that was seen as some sort of barometer of recovery in London. I think the metal was taken away and melted down for the war effort. 17A, Canonbury Square, was where Evelyn Waugh lived between 1928 and 1930. It's where he was living when Vile Bodies and Decline and Fall were both published. Interesting to note, no plaque, isn't it? That's funny. It's another great London literary address, but not in the eyes of Islington Council. We're just going to pass out of Canonbury Square down into Canonbury Place. And I remember when I first came down here, I think it must have been when I was living in Highbury, and I couldn't believe what I'd stumbled upon, what I'd walked into. This is a whole other world. There are other Georgian squares in London. I mean, they don't have a residence that George Orwell lived in. There aren't too many other places like this in London. In fact, I can't think of any other places like this in London. Well, this magnificent tower here behind me is one of the crown jewels of Islington. This is the oldest building in the London Borough of Islington, Canonbury Tower, built on the site of Canonbury Manor House. There was a manor house here originally in the 1360s, but this building here was built by the priors of St Bartholomew down there in Smithfield. They started work on this tower in 1509. It was a prior called Bolton, Prior Bolton. And apparently he was into astrology and he'd seen all these warnings of floods. So he started building towers on high ground. He built one at Harrow, which apparently he stocked with 2 years' worth of food and drink. He was a very early doomsday prepper. After the dissolution of the monasteries, not that long after, this tower and manor house were completed in 1532. The manor was given to the Earls of Northampton, one of which tried to place his daughter-in-law, Lady Jane Grey, on the throne, for which he was executed, and so he lost the manor. It then passed through a number of hands, and for a period of time it was a lodging house, and so quite a few famous people came to lodge here over the years, including Washington Irving, the author of Rip Van Winkle, also Oliver Goldsmith, the great kind of playwright, novelist and poet. He lived and wrote here. Charles Dickens wrote a Christmas story about a lamplighter who lives in Canonbury, and that also features Canonbury Tower. It's a really magical location. There's a little, well, there used to be a little community theatre around the back there where I saw a fantastic performance of a John Godber play. I think it was called Bouncers by the Tower Theatre Company. I wonder if they're still going. It's so fantastic to have such an old building, over 500 years old, still functioning, nestled here in an inner London suburb. Isn't it magical? It's speculated that there was perhaps a Roman road that ran through Canonbury that came out of the Barbican and then would have passed through here on its way through Highbury Grove. It would have cut through this area here around Canonbury Square near the tower here. So we'll continue down Canonbury Place, and then we're going to kind of loop around the area a little bit, winding and wending our way. I feel like as we're in Islington, we should practice a little bit of Dirk Gently's Zen art of navigation, where we just kind of follow people and wander around following our nose. We've got some definite points we've got to hit for sure. Other than that, the joy of Canonbury is just wandering around these beautiful streets here. So here's the Canonbury Tavern. There was a tavern on this site and a tea garden in 1700. This building here is a more recent building. It was built in the 1840s. But the tea garden is the original tea garden out there. It's a surviving London tea garden and pleasure garden, and I believe some of the trees even date from that era. Just opposite the Canonbury Tavern, we have this really wonderful little parade of shops here. And like I say, I remember the first time I wandered down here. I came from Highbury, crossed over St Paul's Road, and into what seemed like another world. The 18th century pleasure garden there with a 19th century pub, this little parade of shops. And up there, the Tudor Manor House and Tower. This is Orwell Place. And I always feel the real magic of Canonbury are these little streets here that wind away down towards the New River from Canonbury Place. Something really magical about them on a summer's evening particularly. It's really lovely to meet Mario back there. Hope your mum's feeling better soon, Mario. Lovely chap. We had a really nice chat about Little Italy and all that sort of stuff, and buried rivers and all the good stuff. I'm going to carry on down Canonbury Place, and then what we'll probably do is just walk back and we'll zigzag around these little roads here that lead off Canonbury Place. In fact, let's do it right now. Let's go down Willowbridge Road, shall we? How can you not go down Willowbridge Road? It's so delightful and peaceful and quiet around here. I'm walking around Orwell Road, and I think I'll go up to Orwell Villas and literally come back round again before I cross the New River and go to the other side. The southern boundary of Canonbury is really Essex Road, which is quite busy and noisy. Here, it's like another little world. And when I was living in Islington, I lived in 3 different places in Islington. All of them obviously were very small places. It's a very expensive area to live in, but we were always able to find somewhere quite cheap and nice to live. Somehow, there's always somewhere. And you could just wander around places like this that were right on your doorstep to find some kind of space and some peace and quiet. It's really delightful. I was just having a really lovely chat with a lady called Gabriella, who lives in the area. We were talking about the way that now, I mean, you can imagine how much these houses cost. A house I'm going to show you later on, where the great author Douglas Adams once lived, that was recently on the market for £5.5 million. Let that sink in. £5.5 million for a house. Well, this is a little bit unexpected. I'd never noticed this before. Ham Baker, it says there. And this, to me, looks like a stink pipe. All pipes used to release gases from sewage pipes. But I wasn't aware of a sewage main running through Canonbury. This is Orwell Villas. Look how peaceful and quiet it is, like a little magical realm, so close to the hustle and bustle of the city. So now we're going to actually double back along Orwell Road to a really special place. Great pub that, I don't know whether to stop and have a pint. What do you think? I think I should have my pint at the end of the walk. That's what I like, as a kind of reward. And I can digest the experience, mull over what I could have done better. Notice all the things I've left out. At least if I do that here, I've got the opportunity to do some pickups, right? But what's interesting, obviously we're walking through these very grand residences, these opulent houses. I'm guessing most of these would have been Victorian rather than Georgian. There might be a few Georgian houses here. And it kind of, this is the popular image of Islington. It's places like this and streets like this, but actually over 50% of the housing stock in Islington is owned by the council, which is interesting. I'm not sure if that is still the case, but it certainly once was. And even some of the lovely grand residences are owned by the council, not necessarily around Canonbury, but certainly around Barnsbury, where I used to live, because after the war, very few people wanted to live here. So the council bought up a lot of the kind of derelict, bomb-damaged houses and did them up and rented them out, and some of them are still council houses. This is the continuation of Willowbridge Road, and there's one of the landmarks of Canonbury just down here. Or 2 actually. So just off Willowbridge Road, look what we have here. The New River Walk. There's a little section of it just here, look. This is a really magical realm here. We've encountered the New River on a number of previous walks. Never this little section here, and this is the final stretch on its journey from Amwell in Hertfordshire down to the New River Head at the top of Amwell Street. The New River was built in 1613 as an aqueduct to supply fresh drinking water to London, and it still fulfills that function today. If you live in London, particularly if you live in North or East London, you will have drunk water that will have come into the city along the New River. And maybe this year is the year when I finally walk the entire length of the New River from beginning to end in one day. And just beside the New River here we have the Marquess Estate, owned by Islington Council. Looks like a fine bit of architecture as well. It occupies quite a big area. Let's go down Caldy Walk. It wasn't on my itinerary, but you've always got to be prepared to embrace change. And I've never been down here before. This is interesting. It's a great little, an interesting little world here. Oh look. And you can continue along Caldy Walk up this set of steps here. If Geoffrey Fletcher was still working today, I think he would include Caldy Walk and the Marquess Estate. It's got the kind of features that he would have enjoyed including. Actually, this is a very Geoffrey Fletcher-esque feature here. A gas lamp. And here we have the Grade 2 listed Marquess Tavern, built in 1854. And it's where George Orwell used to drink, apparently. It's a Young's pub, obviously does a fine pint of Young's, but it appears to be closed at the moment, which is interesting. It was quite a posh gastro pub last time I was here, but back when I lived in Highbury, I used to like sitting out the front there, a couple of little tables in front of the pub, and that's where I'd sit, right near the New River, enjoy a lovely, delicious pint of Young's. Let's hope it's back up and running soon. Another lovely chat with Gino, who was there driving his London cab. There's three wonderful conversations I have with people today who watch the videos, enjoy the work. So it's prompted me actually to feel like I should go down to Essex Road, which is the southern boundary. Is that the southern? The southern boundary of Canonbury. And we're going to end this walk today. I want to end it, well, say that, I don't really know is the honest truth, but I certainly want to go up to the house where Douglas Adams lived, which technically I don't think is Canonbury, but it kind of makes a nice point to the walk. Essex Road is another one of those great London roads, a principal road of London, a road that tells its stories of London. I used to spend like whole Saturdays down here, come down here, go to Flashback Records. There's another record store down there as well. There was a great kind of junk shop place where you could pick up all sorts of treats like old Super 8 film and old Super 8 cameras and bits and bobs. And you go to Steve Hat's, the fishmongers, to get some dinner and then come back in the evening to one of the comedy clubs along here. There'd be some great comedy nights up here. I remember seeing Brendan Burns, Rob Newman. Rob Newman used to hang out in one of the pubs up here. It's fantastic. There's a vigil up ahead for the florist who had a stall outside Essex Road Station, and he was stabbed and murdered recently. So this is the vigil. Apparently the guy was called Tony, and he's had a stall here for years and years and years. This is a grand old building. This looks like it would have been a cinema at one point in the past. I think it was a bingo hall when I lived in the area. Not sure what it is now. South Library here, which is a beautiful building, opened in 1950. Take the little set of steps beside South Library up here. I think it's called Halton Road or Halton Place. And next to it we have the aptly named Pleasant Place. Pleasant Place. So we'll just turn here into Cross Street. This is another one of my favourite little streets in Islington, Cross Street. It looks like the frame store here is no longer the frame store. Not sure what it is now. It looks like it's either housing or maybe there are artist studios here. And we'll just go along here, along Dagmar Passage. Look at this, isn't it great? So here we have the little Angel Puppet Theatre. A little hidden gem in the back streets of Islington here in Dagmar Terrace. I remember that the actor Clive Owen was quite instrumental in saving this little puppet theatre from closure a few years ago. And we'll just make a passing reference to St Mary's here, one of the great landmarks of Islington. In front of it is the old post office, which is now some sort of swanky shopping arcade. And beside that is the great King's Head Theatre pub. I've had a piece of work produced in the past and had many great nights in the King's Head. We're going to eschew the more famous locations in Islington, some of its lesser known locales. Here's another lovely little passageway here beside St Mary's that would have caught the eye of Geoffrey Fletcher, particularly this old gas lamp here. Great to meet Ed and Courtney back there. We had a lovely little chat. It's been a very sociable walk in Islington. I think that's what, 5 people I've chatted to who watch the videos. Of course, gladdens my heart to have those connections back here in the old stomping grounds. Also, I've got a special connection to the area because it's not only the first place in London that I lived with my wife, it's also where my kids were born. So it's a special place for me. Right, got a couple more very special locations to come. I bet some of you can guess where they are. I've hinted at one, and there'll be another one which I had forgotten about, and I thought if I leave this one out, the comments will be flooded with, you can't believe you didn't go to or didn't mention, so I will do that. Trust me. So we're going to go down Gaskin Street, back to Essex Road for a short distance. Actually, this has accidentally brought me back to one of the places that people would have been upset if I'd have missed out. The old Queen's Head over there, fine old pub. I performed stand-up comedy in there. We'll do another video, another day to the area to the south of Essex Road, down towards Hoxton, the City Road, Wenlock Basin, the City Road Basin, all that business down there, the Pink Floyd Studios and Britannia Row, all that sort of stuff. The Winchester pub there, that was a great comedy night in the basement of there. That's where I saw Brendan Burns and Rob Newman and all sorts of other people. Just trying to remember, I might have even performed there at some point. And next door to it, we have a great old-fashioned, what was a greasy spoon, and then it became a kind of quite posh sausage shop. I don't know what it is now. So we'll go down St Peter Street here beside the Winchester, and we're just going to turn into Colebrook Row. I associate Colebrook Row with Charles Mary Lamb. Charles Lamb was a very influential essayist, and he lived here somewhere. I'm not sure if it was this house here or somewhere else further along Colebrook Row. I may have this completely wrong, but dead opposite there is Lamb's Mews. And many famous literary figures came to visit Charles Lamb when he lived here, including Samuel Taylor Coleridge, I think Thomas de Quincey as well. They would walk across the fields of Islington to visit Charles Lamb. Here we have Compton Terrace, which is where in the late 1980s the great author Douglas Adams moved from Upper Street. When I was a kid, was absolutely blown away by the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy TV series. I wasn't quite, I wasn't quite advanced enough to have caught the radio series, although I do remember my neighbour Barnaby telling me about the radio series. So when it came on the telly, it was a huge event. I loved it. I love it to this day. And I think it really did help inform the sensibility of a whole generation, just the way, the sense of comedy, the way he handled ideas of science. For me, Douglas Adams is one of the great British writers of the 20th century, bar none. And the Dirk Gently books I also really, really loved. I haven't actually seen the more recent adaptations of those. But the character Dirk Gently lived in an office in Islington, and Islington features a lot, particularly in the first Dirk Gently book, but also so does Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There are some references to Islington. It's at a party in Islington where Arthur fails to hit it off with Trillian, who he accidentally met on Earth. And I think he used the name of, as an estate agent up here, called Hot Black Desiato, and that becomes a character in Hitchhiker's Guide. I think it's some sort of scene that takes place in a prehistoric cave. And this is where Adams lived in the late 80s, by which time I guess he'd have been pretty successful and quite wealthy by then. That house recently went on sale for £5.5 million, £5.5 million. That's a lot of money. I don't know the actual house that Douglas Adams lived in. I don't know if it's actually got a plaque on it, because Islington Council had a poll a couple of years ago to see if there were any places that needed a plaque. And I don't know whether Adams's old address was successful. Well, I was going to end the walk here at Compton Terrace. Let's go through here, shall we? Just to sometimes sit in here and have my lunch. Well, I was going to end the walk at Compton Terrace with Douglas Adams and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Douglas Adams, one of my favourite all-time authors. But there's one more place that I can't miss out. You would never forgive me if I did. Some of you won't know what I'm talking about. And it just happens to take us past the Regent's Canal and past one of the former homes of our current Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. He lived somewhere down there in one of those houses down there. I'm not entirely sure which one, but it's close to the mouth of the Islington Tunnel. So down there we have the Regent's Canal, and that's the point where it enters the Islington Tunnel. And it runs beneath the streets here and right through Islington, emerging on the other side of Barnsbury. I was fortunate enough to go through there on a barge a couple of years ago and give a talk and do some screenings on the way. It was absolutely brilliant. There's a video here on my channel of that journey. Interpretation plaque here that tells us that the tunnel was built from 1815 to 1818 and was dug by a band of navvies using explosives, wheelbarrows, horses and sheer physical strength. Parallel to the Regent's Canal, we're going to turn into Knoll Road, and there's a very notorious location down here that we simply must visit before this walk is complete. Some of you will know exactly where I mean. Knoll Road, Islington, is famous for its association with the playwright Joe Orton. Orton lived here with his lover Kenneth Halliwell in the 1960s. One of the most sort of famous incidents in Orton's life was when him and Halliwell were sentenced to prison for defacing library books that they took out of Islington Library. I think they put in sort of indecent images and they defaced some of the pages and wrote in them and stuff. And some of those books now are on display in Islington Library, would you believe? But here at 25 Knoll Road is not only where Orton lived, but it's also where he died. He was murdered by Halliwell, bludgeoned to death with a hammer.
What are you doing, bro?
How you doing, mate? You all right? Yeah, making a video. Yeah, well, this house here, it's a famous house.
This is nice photo.
Oh yeah, it's great. That's all right, no worries, mate. Have a good day. John Lahr wrote a fantastic biography of Orton called Prick Up Your Ears, which I highly recommend, as are the Orton diaries and journals and letters are fantastic as well. And he was super famous in the 60s. That's in the days when a playwright became megastars. You know, he hung out with people like all the Carry On stars. He was really good friends with Kenneth Williams. And that's a time when being a gay man was a radical act. You know, I'm not sure at what point it became legal in the United Kingdom. I think it was in the mid-1960s. So Orton was quite a challenging character for the British establishment, even the artistic establishment, to deal with. He only had a very short career as a playwright due to the intervention of Kenneth Halliwell, obviously murdering him in his prime. Some of his plays are Entertaining Mr. Sloane, also Loot. He was a really fantastic literary figure. I think he was originally from Leicester. And he lived in a tiny little flat up there, at the top of that house. There's a fantastic film adaptation of Prick Up Your Ears with Gary Oldman playing Orton and Alfred Molina playing Kenneth Halliwell. They filmed around Islington, but they didn't film in this street here for some reason. They filmed up in St Peter's Street, which is slightly odd. And I suppose as well, it just goes to show how the area changed in that time. That concludes this walking tour of secret Islington and around the streets of Canonbury, and slightly playing a little bit fast and loose with the definition of Canonbury to take in Douglas Adams and Joe Orton and a bit of the Regent Canal. I hope you enjoyed that. It was a real pleasure for me to revisit these streets. I need to find a pub now. It's really hot today and I'm getting a bit tired. So thank you so much for joining me on that great walk. And as I always like to say, I look forward to seeing you on the next walk, wherever that may be. And actually, I don't know where it'll be because I'm doing it with somebody else. And yes, I don't know where it'll be. We haven't decided yet. Take care, have a great week. I look forward to seeing you then.